Hi, I'm Moss here, and today I have Stax's SR009S, their new updated SR009s, and their top-of-the-line amp, the T8000. And Stax Japan kindly lent me these for a month to listen with and review. I know it's kind of not going to be an ideal review, as I don't really have anything to compare it with. Ideally, I'd have something like, the Mr. Speaker's new Veloce and other amps available to compare it with. But today I'm just going to go over my experience of this top-of-the-line system, as I wanted to see how it compared with what I already had. So for example, we have Hi-Fi Man Susvaras, and I have the Focal Utopias, which are my standard. These are the headphones that I own, these are the headphones that I use. So back years ago, I went to Stax at their old headquarters to interview them. They're an interesting company because decades before the ultra high-end became normal, they were making kind of ultra high-end gear, such as super high-end amps and what have you. And because there was no market back then, they were too far ahead of their time in that regard. They went bust. And they started up again with only 3 core people at their head. The principal CEO and their main PR guy, Mr. Sasaki, who's just retired, and anyone who's been to the Stax table at the Tokyo shows will recognize. And their a single engineer who did all their work and would only work on one product at a time. Now, Stax bet their entire company on the new SR009s at the time. That product was, their new flagship. They put everything into it. The problem is, of course, that being a really small company, small enough that the bosses all sat in desks in the warehouse, kind of small. That they ended up, one of their greatest fans was the owner of Edifier. Now, Edifier agreed to kind of buy them out, although keep them as completely independent. And that gave them, the kind of capital they needed to guarantee the success of the SR009s. Now, the SR009s were hugely successful. When I visited, there were just none in stock available for shipping, and they were constantly that way for a long time. So now, of course, the next generation has come in. They've got a new factory. A lot of stuff has changed. But the thing is, now they can make progress on things like the new amp. Now, the problem they had back then, again, with the amp in the question, was that they only had a limited size of chassis that they could use for their top-of-the-line amps, and it wasn't big enough to incorporate all the things they needed to make a really good, the old successor to the old vintage T2, which was a massive and old-school, massively overkill Stax amp. Now, I don't know how much you know about chassis work, but maybe you've read things like the Shit Happens story. But they are, it's a big deal to get a custom chassis made, and they want to make everything in Japan. So everything they make, everything they use is entirely from Japan. None of it is made in China or whatever, unless you include, certain parts may not be made in Japan. But essentially everything is Japanese made, and that's one of the key things about Stax, and one of the key things in their sales, that everything had to be from Japan, and that's what also adds up to the cost of these things as well. But now with the capital from Edifier, they could go and make these amps and make these products. And with the SR009, they've improved them considerably in every way, down to the metal straight as the holes in them, changing the shape of the holes even to get the most ideal airflow. Now, the original SR009s were a very delicate sounding, they're very beautiful with vocals. But they really ideally needed, a third-party amp to get the most out of them. Now, I owned them, and I used them with various borrowed Stax amps, and they were still very, very good, but they were kind of at the same time, I owned a pair of Audio-Technica AD2000s. Now, there's the AD2000X as a successor to that, but generally it's much the same kind of pair of headphones. The best way to describe it is, imagine you take a grader like the 325, and then which is very kind of, in your face, kind of great rock out headphones. And then you put them in a very comfortable chassis, basically. They're very comfortable, but they're really mid-forward, in your face, super rock out cans. And after listening with the AD2000s, they're not really refined. They're kind of harsh in the top end and that kind of thing. As delicate and great the SR009s were, they were kind of sounded like they were asleep. So, later on, and this is relevant to the SR009S in this case, later on, what I wished Audio-Technica would do is they take that really great rock-out sound and they make a really high-end pair of headphones, a really worthy flagship. And I was very pleased to find that at the last Tokyo show, they'd done just that. The ADX 5000 was at the show, and it was everything I wanted in an Audio-Technica. It covered the full range from bass through to treble. It would really rock out, and it was really detailed, and really a true high-end flagship, and something that I hope to review in the future. Now, that kind of headphone, I thought that and the SR009S were my best headphones that I heard at the show last. Now, the SR009S sounds like an ADX5000 that has mated with an SR009. It has that real in-your-face, everything jumps up right into your face kind of presentation that the old Stax didn't quite have. Everything was kind of relaxed and kind of out there, but not quite in your face. And of course, with the bass and everything boosted nicely by this amp. I mean, the amp, I'm sure, is not what's boosting the bass, but the ability to deliver, the very high voltages that are present in the electrostatic headphones very fast is, what makes this combination great. And again, I regret that I don't have a chance to try it with other amps. There are other commercial amps out there, but they're kind of limited for various reasons. Mainly because kind of unfortunately, the very aggressive attitude of certain people towards any third-party manufacturers who manufactured electrostat amps. The vitriol actually put off a lot of manufacturers ever trying, including Schiit Audio, who actually built and designed one. And it's really a shame because these are really amazing. Now, if they can be more amazing through other gear, I'm not surprised. The amp itself uses, I won't go into the design internals except to say that it uses a couple of 6922 tubes, but they're very precisely matched apparently, and they're installed. They're not absolutely not tube rollable. I mean, you can roll tubes if you knew how to rebias it, but it's not an auto bias amp. Everything has to be done by the factory or the distributor. The kind of unfortunate thing about these tubes is that they're new, not new old stock, but Electro-Harmonix tubes, and Electro-Harmonix 6922s, as I found, are kind of not the best. So it's kind of puzzling in a top-end amp that they don't have the best tubes, but again, it may not just be the tube, it may be implementation as well, and it'd be really, really interesting to see what can be done with some really good new old stock tubes. But the thing manufacturers have trouble with is, for example, you would take Schiit Audio, who used 6922 equivalent tubes in their amps. They either had to find a massive batch of new old stock tubes, which are available, but they're kind of not the best quality. All the really good stuff has been hoarded away. And to find anything that's really good, you can only find in really small numbers. So if you're lucky, there's someone making a tube type which is new, like there are tongue sole reissues, which we already talked about in Lear 3. And there's also Electro-Harmonix and, I don't know how you pronounce their name, Pavane, who also make new tubes. And they can be kind of hit or miss. So the thing is, there's obviously more that can be gotten out of these headphones, but I will talk as much as I can about the sound. So the amp itself has a number of features that aren't really obvious. You have your usual outputs. Now, of course, you'll notice if you're not familiar with Stax that they are 5-pin Pro outputs. Very old Stax had what was called normal output, which used half the voltage. They had an extra center pin to prevent the use and blowing up a pair of those old Stax. When they changed the higher double the voltage, they removed the center pin to stop the old Stax being plugged in there. Of course, you've got your power switch. Now, the volume control is interesting. It's actually a split volume control. Now, it has two sections, although the second section isn't marked. The outer section is for the right, and the inner section is for the left. So you can actually adjust this by holding the right and then turning just the center for the adjusting the balance between the left and the right. And then if you turn them both all the way down to one side, then they will reset back to perfectly balanced. Now, the other interesting thing is the inputs can be muted, and the volume control can be set to internal, or if you're like me, and just below here there's a Hugo 2, I want to use the Hugo 2 volume control, I can set it to external, which will bypass the volume control. This is, of course, a bit dangerous. You have to make sure if you're not switching the source, I have line 1 happens to be a Hugo 2. There's nothing on line 2, but line 3 is an Yggdrasil. So before turning to that, I make sure to set it to the internal volume. But otherwise, then you've got 4 inputs. You've of course got 2 single-ended, and you can hear the relays switching in there as I adjust them. And the fourth one is actually an additional component, which you'll see on the back. There's a section there for maybe, I don't know, it could be a phono stage, it could be a DAC, probably most likely a phono stage given the size. Anyway, that's a quick overview of the functionality of the amp. So the sound with these, if you haven't heard electrostats before, it's really kind of hard to describe. Maybe I'll go kind of backwards and say, well, normally electrostats aren't known for their bass slam. They becomes kind of woolly. And one of the things you need with electrostats is to keep the seal on your head. If you break that seal, the bass starts to get out of control. But imagine you have bass slam. And this is what the amp provides, because you need a big beefy amp to get that high voltage running very fast. Imagine you've got bass slam, but it's the most incredibly detailed bass slam you've ever heard. It's like you can hear ridiculous amounts of detail in bass notes. And it's weird. It's like everything comes out with super pinpoint precision. It really does. It's like when I first heard electrostats, and this was back in sometime after I came to Japan, maybe about 2009 or so. I went into a store and I could try the electrostats, and I tried the 404s, and I thought at the time I had Denon D5000s, and I thought these things make my Denons seem like a pretentious effort at sound reproduction. It's just so superior, and I was going to buy a set on the spot, and I was umming and ahhing, and then I had all my money in Australian dollars. The Australian dollar crashed, and it didn't happen, which was really sad. But I kind of, that was one of my regrets. But it's the, compared to the Utopias, now we have the Susvaras. The Susvaras, if you have a really beefy amp, give you a lot of detail and a lot of impact. But nothing seems, and same with the Utopias, they give a real sense of depth. And the best I've got out of them so far has been with the Hugo 2 and their recable, which are discussed in the Hugo 2 videos. And that came the closest to getting the kind of sense of depth that these could produce. But still, these were wide, were not really wide. They're not HD800 kind of wide. They're not artificially wide. But everything comes through with absolute pinpoint precision. So you can see these headphones like sitting here between the camera and stuff behind them. But the exact where stuff is coming from in the sound space around you was so precise, even down to the deep bass notes. And these deliver really, really deep bass. So it's a really a weird experience because you hear everything so absolutely precisely. Even things like Massive Attack's Angel, the rumble thumping bass. They're probably not. They're flat. They're generally flat in tuning, so they're not the most ideal pair of headphones, tonality-wise, for something like Massive Attack. But the interesting thing listening to that track is, at one point, not after the beginning and towards the middle, it gets a little bit quieter and then a little bit louder again. It's just very subtle, but I'd never noticed that on any other pair of headphones. And I was hearing little different things, rumbles that were going on in the track that I hadn't heard before. Now, some of that will come out in the Utopias, but that little bit of quietness in there and then loudness again, I'd never noticed. And it was weird that these took a step up from the Utopias, and I'd thought years ago, planers will catch up. And everything seems to, everything had more punch and slam, but the SR009s. But now we have the SR009S that can deliver that. That now makes them, to me, still the king of headphones. And if I could try it with something like a Blue Hawaii, I would. And then it's like made me think again, I want a pair of these, but, like over $4,000. And there's no no magic discounts you can find online. They just don't exist for Stax, and and then you need an amp. I'd have to build one, or buy one, or something like that. And it's the whole set here is worth more than my car. I just don't think it's going to happen, which is really sad. And I'd still be stuck with that thing: one pair of headphones and one amp, and I couldn't use them with anything else. So, they're just really amazing to listen with, and really uncanny. It's like electrostats are still like nothing else. And if you've auditioned the Sennheiser HE1 system, you'll know what I mean. It's just like, what the heck? It's just so different. And it's like that. Or if you audition the Shangri-La, especially with something like a good source, like Dave or whatever, that was the only thing that probably bested it. And it's, again, you're looking close to $50,000 for the whole rig, where you had instruments literally coming out from over there in the room in binaural recordings. That was just really uncanny stuff. This is kind of heading in that direction, but it's a fact that they can deliver both, punchy and direct and immediate sound, and super precision all through from the lowest bass, which they don't do rumble. As again, they're not the most tuned for really giving you the really good rumble, but the rumble comes through up to the hearing the deliciousness of the decay of a cymbal. So again, they're still, to me, they're still the king of headphones. And I'm going to really be really sad. I'm going to send these back, and I will miss them a lot. And maybe in the far future, maybe I'll be able to get a pair or something like that. But still, I thought planers would catch up, and in some ways they haven't quite. So I hope that this was not I can't go and I couldn't compare it with other amps. I couldn't compare it in a lot of detail with other headphones, but I hope that gave you an idea of what this system is like and what electrostats are like. Definitely, if you can, audition a pair, and if you can with, say, something like a Chord TT or Dave as a source, I recommend it. So you get that absolute sense of precision where everything is. And, it's really nice to see Stax being successful again. And for the people who are really into Stax specifically and won't touch anything else, they, now have a flagship system which is just really highly enjoyable. Thanks for watching the video. Before you go, did you know that my videos are entirely supported by people like you? For the equivalent of buying me a coffee once in a while, you'll get to see the rough cuts in advance. You can also interact with me on chat or email me for advice, or generally interact with the little community we have going of Patreon supporters. Head over to patreon.com/Currawong for more information. Also, there'll be written reviews of this product on my website, which you can access easily at here.reviews. And if you don't want to sign up to be a patron, you can also support my videos by buying your headphones through the links on the sidebar. And in doing so, you'll help support independent reviews. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you online.